So imagine for a second that you are standing right in the middle of a massive, buzzing, crowded room. Or, well, honestly, you're probably just staring at your phone right now.
Yeah, looking at a screen with like thousands of followers.
Right. Hundreds of comments, an endless stream of DMs. You are algorithmically and socially totally surrounded. And yet, in that exact moment, staring at that blue light, you feel completely, utterly alone.
It's incredibly visceral, almost heavy physical sensation. And looking at the data, it's a sensation almost everyone watching this has experienced.
It is the great modern paradox. I mean, we are currently the most connected humans have ever been in history. We carry global networks in our pockets, yet recorded levels of loneliness are at an absolute all-time high. Why? Because that digital connection is actually a biological trap if you don't understand one specific evolutionary trait.
And if you're obsessed with the why behind human behavior and the hidden hardware running your daily life, you are in the right place. Hit subscribe and turn on that bell to join the Insight Lab. We drop deep dives like this every week to help you outsmart the average. Now, let's get into the data.
Because the stakes here are massive. The way our culture usually talks about loneliness is just fundamentally flawed. We treat it like it's a personal failure, a bug in your system.
Right, like you just need to manage your calendar better.
Exactly. You think, oh, if I were just more outgoing, I wouldn't feel this hollow. But today, we're breaking down the intelligence paradox of the social brain. We are going to reveal why your brain actually physically hurts when you are isolated.
Because understanding this shifts the whole paradigm. This isn't about feeling a little better on a Friday night. It's about hacking a baseline survival mechanism. If you don't understand what your neurochemistry is actively trying to do to you, you will constantly fight a 50,000-year-old piece of hardware.
And the evolutionary logic is where I want to start with this, because the premise in these biology papers seems honestly counterintuitive at first.
How so?
Well, if I'm separated from the pack isolated on the savannah 50,000 years ago, my chances of survival plummet. I need maximum energy, right?
You would think so, yeah. Maximum focus.
Right. So why would evolution design a mechanism loneliness that triggers a depressive, low-energy, miserable state right when I need my strength the absolute most?
Because the math of savanna survival dictates that a solo human simply cannot generate enough strength to overcome the environment, no matter how much adrenaline you have.
Wow, really?
Yeah, I mean, a single human cannot hunt large game effectively. A single human cannot maintain a watch for nocturnal predators without eventually succumbing to
sleep deprivation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you certainly can't raise offspring to maturity safely alone. The evolutionary math is zero. Solo survival was a biological impossibility. So that painful state of loneliness is not a flaw in the system.
It's a feature.
It's the system functioning perfectly, yes.
It's a biological alarm bell. Like how hunger signals a deficit of calories or thirst signals you need hydration.
It is the exact same somatic mechanism, but signaling a deficit of social proximity. The physical pain of loneliness is your nervous system screaming at you, punishing you for wandering too far from the tribe.
Which brings us to the actual neurology of that emergency state. These papers introduce this concept called social baseline theory.
Right, it's fascinating.
Yeah, my understanding is that the default state of the human nervous system is not individualistic at all. The brain's baseline assumption is that you are part of a collective.
Yes.
It assumes there are other eyes to see danger, other ears to hear predators,
and other hands to gather calories. The brain is fundamentally an energy conservation engine. It constantly outsources the cognitive load of threat detection to the surrounding group.
So when you're in a group, your amygdala, the threat center, can just kind of chill out.
Exactly. It downregulates. It knows others are sharing the surveillance burden.
Yeah.
Social baseline theory posits that being alone requires a massive, unsustainable spike in neural energy. You suddenly have to do all the processing yourself.
So when those human signals disappear, the brain doesn't just feel sad, it goes into a state of severe physiological hypervigilance.
The autonomic nervous system realizes the perimeter is undefended. It immediately dumps a cascade of cortisol into your bloodstream. Your blood pressure actively rises to prepare for imminent physical trauma.
Man. And crucially, your sleep architecture completely changes. This was the most mind-blowing takeaway for me.
The sleep disruption is huge, yeah.
When the brain goes into hypervigilance, we know cortisol wrecks deep sleep. But it's not insomnia just because you're in your feelings about being lonely. It is a targeted physiological protocol.
Right. Your subconscious brain literally thinks there is no one awake to watch the cave entrance.
So it forcefully prevents you from entering deep REM sleep.
It will not allow the paralysis of deep sleep because the environment isn't biologically safe. The sheer physical exhaustion of running that threat detection radar 24/7 is what makes chronic loneliness so lethal.
We're talking immune system degradation, systemic inflammation.
Massively elevated risk of cardiovascular disease.
Yeah.
The body is literally burning its own infrastructure to keep the radar spinning.
But wait, here is where the Savannah logic breaks down for me, and where the real conflict with modern life begins. My primitive brain desperately wants a tribe, but my phone says I have one. I can FaceTime my family right now. I have a 5G connection to billions of people. I post a photo and instantly get hundreds of algorithm signals that I'm validated.
Yeah.
Why is my nervous system entirely rejecting that data?
The hardware lag is the culprit.
Hardware lag.
Yeah, evolution operates on a glacial timeline, and our neurological hardware just hasn't caught up to the digital age. The social brain we have does not understand fiber optic cables or pixels.
So it's looking for a specific checklist.
A very specific physical sensory checklist to register true connection and actually turn off the amygdala.
Physical microsignals, things a high-def screen just physically cannot transmit.
Right. The brain is looking for sustained mutual eye contact, which triggers neural mirroring. It analyzes pheromones, chemical signals we unconsciously exchange in physical space.
Wow.
It tracks microexpressions that lag on video calls. It even looks for synchronized breathing, which happens naturally in deep in-person conversation.
So when you scroll through social media or sit on a Zoom call, your visual cortex sees a face, but the rest of that sensory checklist comes up completely empty.
Totally empty. So the nervous system runs the diagnostic, sees the pixelated face, detects no pheromones, no synchronized breathing, no tactile feedback. And the output is...
Threat remains. We are still alone in the wilderness.
Exactly. And this creates a devastating dopaminergic loop. Social media is incredibly efficient at delivering dopamine, the reward neurotransmitter, gives you a microdose.
But dopamine doesn't signal safety.
No, it does not downregulate the nervous system. The chemical required to actually turn off the loneliness alarm and lower cortisol is oxytocin. And oxytocin is almost exclusively generated by real-world synchronized physical interaction.
It's like digital connection is a car dashboard telling you you have a full tank of gas, but the sensor is just broken.
That's a great analogy.
You feel the dopamine moving the needle, so you think you're fueled up, but you don't actually have any oxytocin in the tank. The engine is still going to stall out.
And the danger of that broken sensor is it stops you from seeking actual fuel. You gorge yourself on the empty algorithmic calories of digital noise, and you feel artificially full.
Full enough that you don't put in the caloric effort to leave the house.
Right, to go engage in physical gatherings and forge the meaningful relationships that actually sustain the organism. But underneath that artificial stimulation, the primitive brain is still starving.
The cortisol cascade just continues unabated, which is a massive structural problem for the modern worker. So if our digital infrastructure is leaving us malnourished, how do we actually answer this biological signal?
You need a framework.
Yeah, for the high performers listening, people balancing remote careers, families, fragmented communities, what is the Insight Lab protocol here? How do we manually override that alarm?
The foundational shift is semantic, but it has profound biological implications. In modern Western culture, we categorize social time as leisure.
Right, like an optional luxury.
Exactly. Something you only do if you have leftover bandwidth after your inbox is at zero. But sociological research insists we must stop treating social interaction as leisure and start programming it as recovery.
Biological recovery, treated with the exact same non-negotiable reference as hydration or sleep.
Yes. You wouldn't say, oh, I'll only sleep this week if I hit my quarterly KPIs.
Because you know your cognitive performance plummets and your body physically breaks down.
Right. So implementing meaningful social interaction as a biological recovery protocol is essential. The researchers outlined a specific methodology, what we can call the social recovery framework.
Okay, let's break that down.
It's a two-part system to systematically disarm the threat detection network. Step one focuses on what sociologists term weak ties.
Weak ties being those small, ambient, seemingly insignificant interactions throughout your day, like the 2-minute chat with the barista or holding the door for a neighbor.
Exactly. Exchanging a quick joke with the cashier.
But I understand these are pleasant. But from a neurochemical perspective, how are these brief superficial moments actually stopping a systemic cortisol cascade?
The mechanism is entirely about acoustic and visual ambient processing. Remember, the amygdala is constantly scanning for threats. When you exist purely in isolated spaces, your apartment, your car, your cubicle,
The brain has no baseline data about the safety of the perimeter.
none. Engaging with weak ties provides that data. When you make brief eye contact and share a low-stakes, positive exchange with a stranger, your brain processes the tone of voice, the lowest facial muscles.
As concrete evidence of a benign environment.
Yes, it tells the nervous system, look, there are other humans here, they are not attacking us, the perimeters is secure.
So just by taking your noise-canceling headphones off for 3 minutes at the coffee shop, you are physically signaling your immune system to stand down.
You are artificially lowering the ambient threat level. However, weak ties are only the perimeter defense. They lower the baseline cortisol, but they do not trigger that massive oxytocin release required for deep recovery.
Got it. So it does.
To achieve that, the framework moves to step 2, building the perfect egg of social connection.
Unpack that metaphor for us. How does the perfect egg map to our neurobiology? I'm assuming the weak ties form the shell.
Yes, the shell represents the structural perimeter. Weak ties buffer you from the hardness of the outside world. They keep the ambient stress out. But a shell alone is hollow. The yolk, the nutrient-dense core that actually sustains the organism, is deep vulnerability. To truly signal safety to the deepest parts of your primitive brain, you have to expose the yolk.
Vulnerability. The concept that absolutely terrifies every high achiever and type A personality watching this right now.
Oh, without a doubt.
We are trained to project competence, to handle our own problems, never let the mask slip. Why does vulnerability work biologically?
We have to return to the Savannah logic. If you are hiding things from the group, constantly posturing, projecting flawless invulnerability, you are a wild card. From an evolutionary standpoint, the tribe cannot fully trust an entity they don't truly understand. You remain an outlier. But when you are vulnerable, when you share a genuine fear, a methy reality, an unpolished goal,
You're deliberately exposing your soft underbelly. You're signaling, hey, I trust this group enough to show you exactly where I am weak and undefended.
precisely. And when the other person receives that signal and accepts it without attacking you, both of your nervous systems register a profound level of tribal security.
Because the brain recognizes you're fully integrated and protected by the collective despite your weaknesses.
Yes, that precise moment of mutual acceptance is what triggers the oxytocin flood. The hypervigilance alarm is finally dismantled.
Wow, that reframes so many modern interactions. Like if you go to a dinner party and spend 2 hours eloquently bragging about your recent promotion and your flawless investment portfolio.
You might extract some dopamine from the elevated social status.
Right, but you go home feeling just as hollow and biologically lonely as when you arrived. Because your brain knows the entire interaction was a simulation.
Exactly. The mask received the validation, not the organism.
The mask cannot metabolize oxytocin.
It really can't. The nervous system knows the acceptance was conditional on the performance. You have to let the tribe see the reality of who you are to actually feed the social brain. Without the yoke of vulnerability, the shell just eventually cracks under the pressure of chronic hypervigilance.
This entire analysis fundamentally changes the geometry of how we view our social lives. We started by looking at the visceral paradox of feeling alone while staring at a screen full of followers.
Yeah.
And what the data clearly proves is that loneliness is not a psychological defect. It is a beautifully designed, profound biological proof that we are fundamentally built for community.
It forces us to abandon the myth of the hyper-independent modern human. We are biologically engineered to outsource our survival to the collective.
We need the weak ties to map the safety of the environment, and we absolutely require the deep vulnerability to anchor us within the tribe.
It's the only scientifically backed way to stop the hypervigilance, lower the systemic inflammation, and finally get your brain to allow you some restorative sleep.
Amazing. Well, before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought that builds on these sociological findings.
Let's hear it.
We just established that our primitive brains require true vulnerability to prove we are vital, integrated members of the tribe, which turns off the life or death stress alarm. We also know that evolution wired us to feel safe only when we are useful to that collective.
Right. Utility and vulnerability. The twin pillars of tribal security.
So consider this. We are rapidly entering an era where artificial intelligence is beginning to automate the very cognitive tasks, problem-solving skills, and creative outputs that previously made us useful to our communities and workplaces.
Oh, wow.
If our biology requires us to feel indispensable to a tribe to turn off the alarm, what happens to our collective nervous system when algorithms can perform our tribal roles better than we can? Are we heading toward a physiological loneliness epidemic driven not just by digital screens, but by a sudden, terrifying lack of biological utility?
That intersection of ancient survival hardware and automated utility is definitely going to be the defining psychological battlefield of the next decade.
It is a massive structural shift to keep your eye on. And look, if you realize today that your IQ and your digital connection are actually a biological trap, you are only halfway there.
Yep.
Because the hypervigilance protocol we just spent 15 minutes unhacking actually physically alters your long-term sleep architecture in ways you cannot easily reverse.
It's dangerous.
So, watch our breakdown on the billionaire sleep myth right here on the screen to complete the puzzle and learn how to actually repair the physiological damage. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today.
Knowledge is only a buffer until it is applied. Build your perfect egg this week.